All right, let's talk about something else
I,
though, because in your international work, you're dealing with all these different levels of uh, technology and technical infrastructure. I mean, what you have and what you can rely on in Western Europe versus what you can rely on in Sub-Saharan Africa is night and day. So, how do you broach those realities of technical differentials in the environments of your customers?
So first of all, I'm like a really good student. So I do tons and tons of research. So I will research what the local, like I want to understand not just what the guidelines that are applied to this particular area, but where those touch points hit the organization, like where that's going to really matter. And I do tons and tons of research. So I'm organized. That's like I want to tell you that I'm brilliant and I'm going to remember all of who's doing what. It's a lot to manage at times. It really is. I have to remember, do I talk GDPR or am I talking infrastructure of privacy data protection principles? Like I have to keep switching. So it's a challenge for me, but here's the nice thing. I can take the wonderful what's working from NIST and what's really working from ENISA or some of these other standards, and I can say, you know what they're doing over here? It's not part of your framework, but you might want to consider it. It works well. So I can bring, I can again be like a bridge and say, these are some principles that might work for you. Maybe we can do that and tie this into what you're already doing. But it's hard. It's hard to keep track of it. And then things are changing. I'm not a law expert. I do have friends that are brilliant in this. So every now and then I make a phone call and say, hey, you work with this group. What's happening there? Um, where it applies a lot, Mike, is in procurement areas a lot. So maybe not the organization, but the organization's interface with somebody's brother's uncle in an area that they need to build a bridge, and there's no real laws on business licenses or privacy, or there's loosey goosiness there about
Yeah.
what is allowed and what's not allowed. And so how do you, and to be quite honest, there are many organizations that they don't have framework. I mean, they're not operating off frameworks. A lot of the NGOs are like that. They're 10 really zealous people that are trying to make something happen, and they're interfacing with a big group like maybe the IMF or the IFC or something, and they're trying to like get some water to some kids at a school, or something like that. So it's a challenge. It's just I'm
How do
diligent,
you?
studious.
And then that raises a really interesting point. How do you get around supply chain risk management in areas that are like that?
Um,
How do you actually
you,
address that?
you don't. So and if you, I mean that's
Be
you
honest,
don't.
yeah.
I mean,
That's the nature of it.
so
Yeah.
let me tell you, I think the biggest example of explaining supply chain risk was this pandemic, and it's a non-technical application to say, do you understand what happens when we've got all our eggs coming from this place and these 5 truck companies are all sick? I mean, that's something that I could use to explain supply chain risk. Sometimes you can't get around it. I mean, like there's nothing
Mm.
you know, you do what you can. And like I said, there's a lot of business that's being done in areas where if you physically need to get into a place, it's literally somebody's uncle. Like I'm joking, but I'm really not. So, you like I said, you do what you can, but in a lot of areas it's just kind of like diligence. Um I also go back to really good people. I think we overlook good quality staff, and I know that it's really hard. I'm gonna put in my shameless plug for women right now, to say that when I first started in cybersecurity, I was the only woman of color, I think, at all in a team of about 20 for many years. And then women started to kind of get involved. But I think you need a varied mentality for security to work well, because the issues come up weirdly and not always in the structured way. And so, women and men think differently. We look at problems differently and we see risk kind of differently. So I also think that the people that are involved in running your cyber security should not all look like the same thing. They shouldn't all think the same. They should be thinking, wait, is this a single point of failure? If we're all and there's a lot of it now, like just there's, 10 really big cybersecurity companies, or tech providers, that if something went wrong, what are all of us going to do? I mean, I know we're dispersed, but are we? you know? So, so
That's something to think about.